Just days before today's release on the report on reducing the national debt, co-chairman Alan Simpson complained about its critics, referring to the, quote, greediest generation. And despite the fact that Simpson himself, as a senator from the 1970s through the late 1990s, helped feed that greed by relentlessly cutting taxes for the richest people in this country and carving out loopholes for them to make and keep even more money. In our fourth story tonight, it turns out Simpson's solution to this problem is to cut taxes for the rich yet again, and to tell the children of this greediest generation they will have to work longer and harder than their parents did to pay for the unprecedented transfer of wealth Mr. Simpson helped to facilitate over the last generation. Our guest tonight will be a member of the commission, a member who will go against Simpson and vote no on sending this report to Congress. The report does do a number of things the wealthy might not like, such as eliminating the tax deduction for the interest on mortgages above $500,000, good idea, and on second homes, such as taxing dividends and capital gains at the same rate as income, also a good idea. And while the rich don't pay any Social Security tax on income over $106,000 right now, under Simpson's plan, by the year 2020, they would pay Social Security tax on income up to $190,000. That's right. Under this brutal austerity plan, a working stiff making $60,000 a year would still pay Social Security tax on all of his income. But a hedge fund manager pulling down $2 million a year would now pay Social Security tax on almost 10% of his income. Brutal. For the most part, the commission got right how we got here, though they were mostly polite enough not to mention the Republican president and Republican Congress responsible.
The escalation was driven in large part by two wars, which, by the way, I always emphasize were never paid for. And so we borrowed money to pay for those two wars and continue to borrow to pay for those two wars. The escalation was driven in large part by two wars and a slew of fiscally irresponsible policies, along with a deep economic downturn.
Most notable among those fiscally irresponsible policies were, of course, the Bush tax cuts. So what is the commission's serious grown-up remedy? More tax cuts. You know something's gone wrong when a report on the government's lack of money declares on page 10, quote, we need to lower tax rates. The richest people in this country right now pay a top rate of 35%. That's when they pay it. If the Bush tax cuts go away, that rate will rise to 39.6% next year, far below its historic peak. The commission wants to cut it even further, to 28%, the corporate rate too. Without reform, the report informs us, it is likely that U.S. competitiveness will continue to suffer. As if U.S. corporations did not just report third quarter profits this year that were some of the highest in history. The way the report saves money is primarily by cutting government services, including eliminating 200,000 government jobs over the next 2 years, right when the economy desperately needs more jobs to grow, which of course would produce more revenue and reduce the debt. As promised, we're joined tonight by Representative Jan Joukowsky, Democrat of Illinois, and a member of the debt panel. Congresswoman, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, first of all, I want to wonder why are the chairman of the panel devoting so much energy to slashing Social Security, increasing the retirement age, which is a really regressive way of going about making fixes, when that actually wasn't on the plate, and that's not the problem with the long-term debt that we're facing?
No, the commission is doing the favor of figuring out the 75-year solvency of Social Security after admitting that it has nothing to do with the deficit, and it's not going to be used for debt reduction either, but we might as well do that as well. Of course, this is not something we need to do right now, and we certainly don't need to save Social Security by cutting Social Security, and not just for future beneficiaries, but actually we're going to begin right now by changing the way we calculate the cost of living adjustment, meaning we're going to give current beneficiaries less money.
You know, one of the things I think that gets really confused in this discussion, I'm wondering if you can sort of walk us through it, is the difference between the deficit we face right now in the short and medium term and what the problems are for the whole U.S. budget in the long term, say 20 years out. Those two things, it seems to me, are getting confused in this conversation. How do you sort of see dividing these up?
Well, even if we just first talk about achieving primary budget balance by 2015, which is the first mandate of this commission. What the Simpson-Bowles proposal does not do is talk about how are we going to get the economy going, create jobs, not interrupt any kind of a fragile recovery by starting to cut the budget too soon. And so one of the lacking things is that we don't stimulate the economy. There's very little talk even about the need to do the unemployment insurance benefits, which is not only good for the 2 million people that are losing their benefits right now, but it's really good for the economy because those people will go out and spend money. But long term, they're talking about a major overhaul of the tax system and claim that by getting rid of all these tax expenditures, that is those deductions and credits, most of which go to wealthier Americans, that we're going to be able to cut about $4 trillion from the budget over the next few decades. So it's both a long-term and a short-term plan. But their plan for health care is to make seniors pay more out of pocket for their Medicare. I mean, you know, there's a lot of talk in the commission about shared sacrifice, but there has not been shared sacrifice for the last 2 decades. They're acting as if we're starting even.
Right.
But of course, all the wealth has gone to the top earners in the country. The wealthiest have gotten richer, and the poor and middle class have gotten poorer. And now they want to solve these problems on the back of middle class Americans, and it's just the wrong way to go.
I think it's a great way of putting it, that we're not starting all sort of at the same place after these 20 years. Finally, here, I want to ask you, you have come out with some of your own recommendations. What are the big things they missed that you would propose as a path to getting on a better sort of fiscal trajectory?
Well, I, of course, looked at the same things, the tax expenditures. I looked at the defense budget. They did too. But I don't cut military pay. They do. I don't cut military health care. They do. And I certainly don't cut Medicare. I say that the Medicare ought to be able to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies to get lower prices. Instead of digging further into the pockets of seniors who are making the grand average of $18,000 a year. That's what our elderly make. I say let's get it out of the pharmaceutical companies and let's put a public option back on the table. Let's make sure that the insurance industry actually has some competition from a plan that will hold down the costs. What I wanted to prove was that we could do this without hurting the middle class.
Congresswoman Janczykowski, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I really appreciate you coming on. I'll throw a financial transactions tax into the mix.
Well, I didn't put a financial transaction tax into the mix, but there are a number of other ideas beyond getting it from the people who have been paying the price while the rest of the people have been partying, and saying that Wall Street needs to pay its fair share as well, and all these hedge fund managers who, by the way, live longer. Chris, when you talk about cutting the age of Social Security, poor people actually aren't living longer. Mm-hmm. And so you got a janitor who's going to have to work longer because the hedge fund manager is going to live longer. So I think there's a lot of inequities in there, and there are places that the money really is that we can fairly ask for in order to reduce the deficit and the debt.
Congresswoman Janczykowski, Congresswoman from Illinois, and also a member of the Debt Commission. Thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Chris.